With my trade idea for Maxx Crosby, not only do the Washington Commanders get younger, they get better. And yes, the Raiders also have a reason to do it.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing about the Commanders on SI, and here with you 5 days a week, sometimes even into the weekend, because we've got plenty to talk about. And coming up on this Saturday bonus episode, Jay Glazer may have crossed a line leading to Maxx Crosby, doing a little bit of cleanup in the media, and why the Raiders and Jets will dance to the tune I'm playing, or at least could consider it. But first, I'm addressing all the negative people who are trying to sell me when it comes to a Maxx Crosby trade, or sell me against my own ideas when it comes to a Maxx Crosby trade. All that coming up on this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and it's all brought to you by FanDuel. Last call for football on FanDuel is Sunday. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Just because you don't like Daron Payne doesn't mean other people in the NFL agree. And just because you don't like Maxx Crosby doesn't mean the Commanders don't like Maxx Crosby. So following up our Maxx Crosby trade conversation, I told you in that episode, if you listen to the entire thing, and every day, as those of you who do that, I appreciate you greatly for doing so, that we had more to talk about with this trade, and that, yes, I knew there were some things, some red flags that people are going to throw up, and that's what we're here to address today, is the red flags against the Maxx Crosby trade. So first and foremost, we got to identify the trade, and my trade offer is defensive tackle Daron Payne, pick number 71, third round overall, and pick number 197 in the 6th round. Now, that pick is going to be pushed later because compensatory picks have not been awarded yet, so it'll actually be in the 200s, but the point value system, when we talk about the draft pick trade values, matches anyway. Or either way, the Las Vegas Raiders then in turn send over Maxx Crosby, and something you're going to notice right off the bat is that there's no first-round pick involved in that Maxx Crosby trade. Now, of course, Jay Glazer, who we'll talk about a little bit more later in this episode, went on record and said that he thinks the Las Vegas Raiders are going to get a Micah Parsons-like deal. Ian Rappaport countered and said, I don't think so, told your boy Q of Locked On Raiders on his radio show in Vegas that I think late first round is probably what you're looking at, and the Daron Payne pick number 71, pick number 197 is late first round value, though there is no actual late first round pick involved there because the Washington Commanders don't have a late first round pick. And then, of course, the Washington Commanders get Maxx Crosby. Now, this package works from a points standpoint. And then just for the record, we use the Rich Hill point schedule or points table here. So if you want to Google the Rich Hill draft pick value charts, you can do that. And you're going to notice that Daron Payne is going to be the filler, right? You get about 68 points for pick number 71. You get about 7 points, a handful of points for that 6th round pick. And then Daron Payne is going to close the gap. And because of recent trades, like the Bradley Chubb trade, where he was basically valued in about 242 points, Montez Sweat about 180 points, you're going to put Maxx Crosby somewhere in the middle there, slightly above Bradley Chubb, actually at about 250 points. The Washington Commanders package comes in at 235 points, with Daron Payne being valued at about a 4th round pick level. And that bridges the gap because not only are the Washington Commanders going to send a little bit of draft capital, they're going to send a starting caliber defensive lineman who the Raiders could possibly be attracted to, but they're also going to take on the entirety of Maxx Crosby's remaining contract. No money is going to be left in Vegas on Maxx Crosby's contract. And when you do that, you lowered the draft compensation required. So that goes from that potentially back end of the first round valuation that Ian Rappaport gave to day 2 pick evaluation, which you're getting a day 2 pick. You're getting a day 3, early day 3 pick valuation on a player, and then you're getting a late day 3 pick as well. And the math all works out. Why does this work for Washington? Well, for starters, Washington is going to get younger in this trade. So for those of you who have already hammered out the comment of Maxx Crosby's too old, don't want him on the Washington Commanders, he is younger than Daron Payne. Now, they're both going to turn 29 Daron Payne this offseason is going to turn 29. Maxx Crosby is going to turn 29 in the preseason. But regardless, he's younger. So worst case scenario, you're going to say the Commanders are staying the same age. And I know you want them to get younger. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. Maxx Crosby, younger than Daron Payne. He's also younger than Dorance Armstrong Jr. So in the he's too old category, we continue to move the goalposts here. At first, it was 32 years old is too old. Then it was anybody in their 30s is too old. Now, if you're going to tell me that even 29 is too old, and 20, like, where are we going to get to here? 28, 27. We just want nothing but rookies. We want to staff a roster full of rookies. Eventually, you got to understand that not every player the Washington Commanders can bring onto this roster any season. I don't know, from 2026 to 2036 to 2046 to 2062. Somebody's going to be 28 years old or older on this roster. It's an inevitable fact of the National Football League. So Maxx Crosby, younger than Daron Payne, younger than Dorance Armstrong. So you're going to have to kind of miss me with the he's too old argument on this whole thing. And then you get the idea of pairing Maxx Crosby with Dorance Armstrong, who, might I remind you, Dorance Armstrong, 5.5 sacks in 7 games, didn't get to finish that full game against the Dallas Cowboys. Could have potentially been up to 6 sacks, maybe even 6.5 sacks by the time he was done there, on pace for about 11, somewhere between 11 and 14 sacks that season. That's a Pro Bowl pace for an edge rusher. Dorance Armstrong was on that pace. Now he's coming back off that ACL. So what do you expect from Dorance Armstrong? That's going to be a little bit tricky, but you have Maxx Crosby. Now you bring him in with Dorance Armstrong. And of course, you still got draft capital if you want to go there and you get even younger on the edge as well. So those are some reasons for the Washington Commanders to do that. Now, that's not the only trade I'm talking about here, because I know a big bugaboo is going to be, yeah, but you give up that 3rd round pick and this team needs to build, quote unquote, through the draft. If you're going to hassle me over the 6th round pick, then I think you're just going to kind of pick negatives to find negatives anyway, because nobody, and I mean nobody in the National Football League, says every team that's building through the NFL draft must covet those 6th round picks. If you're going to get really bent out of shape over the 6th round pick, I just don't think we're talking about realistic things here, and so we're going to have to move on. But for those of you who are not getting bent out of shape over the 6th round pick, not only can the Washington Commanders afford to give up that 3rd round pick with my idea, and remember, this is just my idea, but they can also get that back. Go call the New York Jets and potentially have a conversation about trading pick number 7 to the New York Jets for picks number 16 and picks number 33. That's 2 picks in the top 40. Better yet, that's 2 picks in the top 35. So if you execute that trade with the New York Jets, you now go from having 2 picks in the top 100, pick number 7 and pick number 71 in the 3rd round. 71 goes to the Raiders. But now you execute this trade and you've got 2 picks in the top 35. So you get younger on the defensive line. You get a Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher, which is something you know this team desperately needs in Maxx Crosby. You can afford the cap hit. You can afford the contract. No problem there. And because of the follow-up trade, you actually recoup that pick on day 2 and you get better. You get 2 picks in the top 35. No picks in the top 10. Got it. But 2 picks in the top 35. That moves Washington into a better position to put even more talent, young talent, on the roster in 2026. When we look at some of the players who could potentially sway them to not make this number 7 overall pick, Ruben Bain comes to mind. David Bailey comes to mind, especially depending on how Dorance Armstrong's recovery is going. But if you have Maxx Crosby, Dorance Armstrong, potentially David Bailey's not even enough to prevent you from necessarily trading that number 7 overall pick. There are some other guys I know a lot of Commanders fans love. Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles to be exact, from Ohio State. And obviously I love Buckeyes more than anybody, or as much as anybody else. But understand this, since 2000, only 7 off-ball linebackers have been drafted in the top 10. Only 8 safeties have been drafted in the top 10. So combined, even, that's only 15 combined safeties and off-ball linebackers since the year 2000. So we've had 25, 26 NFL drafts, and very, very few, very, 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 very small sample size of the time do those positions get drafted in the top 10. The NFL just does not value them as highly as maybe sometimes fans and even sometimes media does. So there is a possibility that even though you love Sonny Styles, you love Caleb Downs, I love Sonny Styles, I love Caleb Downs, possibility here, very real possibility that the NFL in whole, and very specifically Adam Peters, doesn't see them at the same value level as you or even I do, and would be willing to trade out of number 7 if a player they do see as top 7 value is not available. And then and by doing so, potentially move back to the New York Jets, who could see a player up there at number 7 that they want to pull the trigger on, get 2 picks in the top 35 in return, and you end up coming out ahead if you're the Washington Commanders. Furthermore, just because you might question why the Raiders would make this deal doesn't mean there aren't reasons. In fact, I've got 3 reasons why both the Raiders and the Jets should and could and possibly would consider making these deals. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by ZocDoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in your network nearby, has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor, believe it or not, does exist, and you have the best chance of finding them with ZocDoc, which is a free app and a free website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. So if you've been putting off doctor's appointments a little bit longer than you should have because you don't necessarily like your doctor, you can go to ZocDoc, make the process simple, search by specialty or symptom, and you can actually find a care team that you care to deal with. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's episode. This episode is also brought to you in part by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked great on paper but just wasn't the right fit in person, you know how important it is to get those hires right. And when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, you need to trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. So spend some more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day. Every day to the everydayers, those of you come through for every single episode, I give you a special thank you for coming through for yet another one. And thank you to everybody out there for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, please go check out the Locked On Everydayer Club, Locked On Commanders Everydayer Club, as where you got 2 tiers, member tier, all access tier. Everything in the member tier, you get in the all access tier plus more, but you might just want what's in the membership tier, and it costs a little bit less than the all access tier. Of course, so go to lockedoncommanders.supercast.com to check both tiers out today and see if either of them moves you and strikes your podcast listening fancy. There are 3 reasons I believe that the Las Vegas Raiders would consider my offer to trade defensive end, outside linebacker, edge rusher, whatever you want to call him, Maxx Crosby, to the Washington Commanders, and 3 reasons I believe the New York Jets would then subsequently agree to the trade that would net them the #7 overall pick and get the Washington Commanders 2 picks in the top 35 instead of 1 pick in the top 2 days of the NFL draft. And we're going to break down why for each of those. So again, recapping our trade offer to the Las Vegas Raiders: Daron Payne, defensive tackle, #71 overall, 3rd round pick, and a 6th round pick in the 2026 NFL draft in exchange for Maxx Crosby. Straight up, it protects the Washington Commanders' 1st round pick this year. #7 for Maxx Crosby, way too rich. You're not ever going to do that. So that's certainly not going to happen. The Raiders would have to give you back draft capital to make that happen. And of course, there's a reality where that happens as well. But that is not nearly considered to be the advantageous situation for Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders. So that's what we're looking for here on Locked On Commanders, is what is most advantageous for Washington. And this deal, while it is the most advantageous for Washington, could also work for the Las Vegas Raiders. One reason being is that there is speculation, or I should say social media member preference, that perhaps Carl Scott, Carl Scott because he interviewed for the Washington Commanders defense coordinator job, that perhaps Carl Scott could be coming to Las Vegas with Clint Kubiak, who's going to be the new head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, expected, not official, after the Super Bowl. from the Seattle Seahawks staff. Perhaps he's going to bring Carl Scott along with him to be his defensive coordinator. If that happens, as we talked about in our build-up to the Washington Commanders' own defensive coordinator hire, Carl Scott is known to come from several different systems, but also has had a lot of experience, a lot of success, I should say, rather, in the Mike Macdonald scheme, which requires an interior disruptor who can give you about 26 pressures in a season, which Daron Payne can do. He's proven he can do. He's done it with Washington. We expect potentially Durante Jones to go with a more heavy set, look for more of an anchor in the middle of his defensive line. Daron Payne is not that guy. So if you have a defense out there who's looking for more of a penetrating disruptor up front, like the Seattle Seahawks like to have, like the Las Vegas Raiders may want to have if Carl Scott does indeed go to Vegas, or whoever the defensive coordinator goes. Of course, that's going to be a fit question more than anything, but I'm not going to sit here and wait to find out who the Raiders D coordinator is to have this conversation with you, because it's time to have this conversation now. So if that is the move, or if a move for a defense coordinator who could use a similar type of defensive tackle in the middle of his line is needed, that's obviously a very, very big reason for the Las Vegas Raiders to go ahead and make a move like this. Number two reason, and this isn't in any particular order necessarily, just the second one we're going to talk about overall, is the version of defense, the version of Las Vegas Raiders that would potentially enjoy a collective group effort on defense versus a single star focused system in Las Vegas for the last few years, at least, if not more. Maxx Crosby has basically been the lone star on the Las Vegas Raiders defense, and they've been kind of happy to go with that. Patrick Graham has been running that system. They haven't really made any major pushes to go get a second guy. I guess Christian Wilkins was kind of the biggest push to go get a second guy. By the way, interior defensive lineman, similar to the mold of Daron Payne. So kind of emphasizes that there as well. But if you're looking for a system of volume players and lots of rotational players and things like that, getting Payne, getting a third-round pick, and even getting a sixth-round pick to go get a developmental defensive player potentially would certainly fit the bill to going and doing that. And if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you have the number 1 overall pick, so you have that to go ahead and work with too, a very high second-round pick. So you get that third-round pick from Washington, and it gives you a good amount of draft capital to build your team around. You can build a match quarter system. You can go through an A-gap system. You can do kind of a lot of different things. And that really brings us to number 3. While the Las Vegas Raiders have obviously had a lot of singular success with Maxx Crosby being their lone defensive star, and he certainly had his fair share of Pro Bowl trips and done all these great things and everything else to build the reputation he has, that to where I've read some Raiders media sites that cover the Raiders, I should say, thinking that they're going to get a mountain of picks. And to be clear, because I haven't actually said this yet, if the ask and if the asking price or the sell price looks like it's going to be a mountain of picks, quote unquote, then I would absolutely tell Adam Peters to pull out of that, because I don't think that's what Adam Peters and the Washington need to do. You don't need to send a Micah Parsons package somewhere for one player. That's not what I'm talking about here. But if the package is fair market value, which is what we're talking about, then that's where I think that Adam Peters needs to get and stay involved. And look, just because a lot of teams may be interested in Maxx Crosby does not necessarily mean that any of them or even one of them is going to be willing to pay the Micah Parsons package that would push Adam Peters essentially out of the conversation, at least as far as my preference would be to push him out of the conversation. Hey, we never know. Adam Peters might be willing to pay that Micah Parsons package for Maxx Crosby. PR be damned. So that's the Las Vegas Raiders. What about the Jets? Why would the Jets be interested? And it's not really that hard of a sell to tell you that the New York Jets might be willing to package a later or mid-round first-round pick and a day 2 pick to move into the top 10 of the NFL draft, right? That's really a fairly easy thing to say. But if the Washington Commanders are not going to go out there and target David Bailey after they trade for Maxx Crosby, if they view Dorance Armstrong as, hey, we like Dorance's recovery, we think that he's on the right path, we're confident that he's going to be able to get back to the production that he had, and now we've got Maxx Crosby, and we don't need to spend our number 7 overall pick on an edge like David Bailey, and he's sitting there at number 7, then the New York Jets would absolutely be a team that you could look at and say, yeah, I could see them wanting to trade up to number 7 and go get David Bailey. And not only do they have a mid-round first-round pick to give you in exchange for that, but they also have that day 2 pick to go up there and do it as well. And just because it's not a quarterback doesn't necessarily mean you can't get a little bit of inflation on there. So I'm not going to get too deep into what an inflation package might look like, but potentially you could get a day 3 pick. Maybe you get that 5th rounder back that you gave up for Laramie Tunsil. I don't know. But the bottom line is, if David Bailey is available at number 7 and you've got Maxx Crosby sitting on your roster, then obviously number 7 comes into play for a team that needs an edge, and the New York Jets certainly could use an edge rusher. You've also got a secondary situation. Remember, the New York Jets just traded Sauce Gardner to the Indianapolis Colts this past season. So if they want to go after a guy like, say, Mansour Delane out of LSU, that they maybe believe is the next Sauce Gardner, they can have to look at guys like the New Orleans Saints, other teams who could use that secondary help as well and get ahead of them. Number 7 obviously would be ahead of the New Orleans Saints at number 8. And third reason, the quarterback thing. Fernando Mendoza is expected, at least as of right now, to go number 1 overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. The Jets currently have a first-round pick at number 2. If they miss out on a quarterback, or if they miss out on Fernando Mendoza, perhaps they go a different route. Perhaps they pivot to another defender. Perhaps they pivot to a skill position group. I don't know. But whatever it is, at number 7, if they like a guy like Ty Simpson or somebody else in this quarterback class, look, I know right now, not a whole lot of sexy top of the NFL draft quarterback options outside of Fernando Mendoza. And I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not as pumped up about Fernando Mendoza as some people are anyway. But we've seen this year after year. Guys build themselves up. Guys have great workouts. They have great interviews. They work themselves into that top 10 conversation. If the Jets, who have proven to be quarterback hungry, don't forget what they did to go get Aaron Rodgers. If they prove to be quarterback hungry again, and they see a guy like Ty Simpson or something like that, and they don't want to let another team go up there and get him, don't be surprised if they try to make a move into the top 10 to go get that. So again, easier to sell the top 10 thing with the New York Jets, harder to sell the Las Vegas Raiders thing for taking Daron Payne and draft capital. But those are some reasons, they're quantifiable reasons, that the Raiders and the Jets could consider what I'm trying to sell here. Of course, that's if Crosby wants to actually leave Vegas, because if he wants to stay, there's a solid chance, I believe, that he actually does. And he's not saying he wants to, but he's also not saying out loud that he wants to leave either. Instead, Jay Glazer is doing that for him, and it doesn't seem to have made Maxx Crosby very happy. That coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Robinhood. What if sports were like trading markets, or what if sports were traded like they are in markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market where you can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I've always known the game. A lot of fans out there, you know the game, but I've never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people, where you're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Features and cleared swap trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders also brought to you in part by Home Chef. With the new year well underway, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big part of a lot of people's routines. You got busy work days, cold winter nights, packed schedules, so having an easy, reliable dinner plan can make a huge difference to any person or family, and that's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door. With easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great, they are rated number 1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. The meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, quick lunches, whatever you want. It saves time and money. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on groceries. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. It sounds to me like Jay Glazer said the quiet part out loud, and Maxx Crosby is trying to unring the bell. So since we last talked, we talked about Jay Glazer's comments. Jay Glazer went on to a show. I don't know what the show is called, but it's with Yahoo Sports, Radio Road at the Super Bowl, San Francisco, and said a lot of things. He quoted, basically said that Maxx Crosby, after he was placed on IR, called him. He was on the phone with him. Like, this is what Jay said. I was on the line with him. Ian Rappaport reports that, Maxx Crosby been put on IR. I'm on the other line with Maxx Crosby, is how he put it. And Maxx Crosby saying, screw these guys. They're shutting me down. I'm not here for it. I want to be traded. I'm done. He says that part out loud. Talks about Maxx Crosby's addiction, history, says that what the Raiders are doing is something you can't do to an addict. Says it out loud into the microphone. Yahoo Sports on stage. Says that he doesn't think that Maxx Crosby is going to be a Raider anymore. Says that he thinks he's going to get traded for a Micah Parsons deal and a package. Not long after that, in fact, as he's talking, the story is just catching fire, right? But not long after that, there's a Raiders fan at Samoan_Raider. And I don't honestly know what this person does. Maybe they have a YouTube channel or something like that. But they go up to Jay Glazer, shake his hand, and then all you can hear is a gentleman say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, "Please tell me you're joking about the Maxx Crosby stuff." And Glazer kind of laughs and says, Max didn't say it, I said it. Well, Jay, that's not what you said on stage, right? And this is a bad look for Jay Glazer. So here's what I think happened. What I think happened is, as everybody else is hearing about what Jay is saying, Maxx Crosby is also hearing about what Jay is saying. And Jay was not pulling any punches. Jay was being very transparent about the connection, the relationship he has with Maxx Crosby, talked about them working out together, talked about them being very vulnerable to each other, and all these other things. And it sounds to me a lot like Jay Glazer basically said the locker room talk out in public, and Maxx Crosby probably didn't appreciate it and called Jay and said, "Hey, dude, WTF? Why the face? If you're a Modern Family fan, you got the joke. If you're not, I'm sorry, but it's funny." So then, not long after that, Maxx Crosby goes on the Herd. He's in Raiders gear. He's at the Raiders facility doing this interview, and he's claiming that he's laughing off the noise. Here's the thing about laughing off the noise, and here's the thing. And he says, "We got random people out here saying a bunch of stuff for me," and basically, like I said, it sounds to me like Max told Jay Glazer some things that he thought was being said in confidence, that he thought was being said, to potentially a friend. And this is where the media player boundaries sometimes get blurred, and they shouldn't necessarily get blurred. And I'll tell you right now, the players that I am quote unquote tightest with in the locker room, if they ever say anything to me during a conversation, like if I'm not recording and I don't have a recorder in front of me in your face, so to speak, not actually in your face, is not rude, but if I don't have a recorder out, like if I have a recorder out, then we're obviously on the record. If I don't have a recorder out, you may even think we're on the record, but before I say anything about what you've just said to me, I'm going to ask you very deliberately, very specifically, can I put that out? Sometimes, and I've had these conversations with players where we're talking, there's no recorder in my hand, there's no camera in my hand, it's just me and one of the guys, and we're talking. And sometimes we talk about topics that don't necessarily see print, they don't necessarily see the podcast. And they'll say something, and I'll say, "Hey, that's really interesting. Can I talk about this in this way?" And sometimes they say, I'd rather just keep that between us. And sometimes they say, "Yeah, dude, by all means, go ahead." And that's just part of the business. That's how we get smarter about the business we're in. You know what I mean? It is what it is. So it sounds to me like Maxx Crosby told Jay Glazer a whole lot of between you and me stuff. And Jay Glazer decided to go up on stage in San Francisco and say it loud and proud into a mic, and then he had to backtrack on it. So Maxx Crosby, look, I'll give him credit for and a lot of respect for getting up there on the Herd and trying to kind of talk it down. But if you put on your media literacy glasses or your headphones, whatever you want to call them, to quote Bowie TV president Kenny Waller, use your clues. What Maxx Crosby doesn't say the entire time, he's laughing, quote unquote, laughing off the noise, or laughing at the noise, I should say. And is frustrated by other people randomly saying things for him. 3 words or 4 words or however many words, whatever version he could say it a lot of different ways. But the words "I'm a Raider" don't come out of his mouth. The words "I'm staying" don't come out of his mouth. The words "I don't want to be traded" don't come out of his mouth. So he gets up there to very much address what's happening. Like, he didn't say directly Jay Glazer, but he's very clearly getting on this program because of everything that's happening, and he wants to kind of try to settle it down or brush it off. But what he doesn't do is say that he's staying. What he doesn't do is say that he doesn't want to trade, and that's important, because if you know anything about Maxx Crosby, and I've never covered him, but because he's a star in this league, I've seen enough of what he said. This is not a dude who shies away from saying what's on his mind. And if "I don't want to leave Las Vegas" was on his mind, he would have said, "I don't want to leave Las Vegas." Doesn't mean he's going to leave. And certainly time between the move of putting him on IR can calm things down. But I will tell you to pay attention when these guys talk about what they're not saying as much as what they're actually saying. And, Jay Glazer's been in this business for a long time. I'm pretty sure he's going to learn a very important lesson about what he did in San Francisco. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, I've got a list of free agents playing in the Super Bowl that I'm paying attention to as potential Washington Commanders targets. So make sure you are subscribed, followed along for Locked On Commanders so you get all the latest episodes. And you can also follow me on X at DHarrison82 or on Instagram at DHarrison_82. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. LockedOnCommanders.supercast.com to check that out. In the meantime, make sure you check out Locked On NFL twice per day on YouTube or wherever you're listening to podcasts. To the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk in real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.